All right, this is Docendo number 40, the first edition of 2021. Let's look at our sentence here. The psychiatrist was very discreet. No matter how much we pestered him, he wouldn't gossip about the problems of his patients, of his famous patients. So, taking a look at this sentence, then, looks like it's a run on, isn't it? So, ask yourself, where is the first clause end? Where does the second clause begin? The psychiatrist was very discreet. That sounds like that could be a complete thought, right? So let's stop there with a period. No matter how much we pestered him, he wouldn't gossip about the problems of his famous patients. So what we have here are two sentences when it should be two sentences rather than one sentence. So we want to fix that run-on. That comma there is correct. The problem, though, is, first of all, we're talking about problems plural, not possessive. So get rid of the apostrophe, no need for that. And then patients, in this case, we're talking about the noun patients as in people, not patients as in the idea or the emotion. So we need to change that to the correct spelling. I think that's it as far as the changes. But looking at the words, notice we have these two homophones, discrete and discrete. Same pronunciation, but different spelling. And we want the meaning here, which is discreet as in prudent, judiciously reserved. So a friend tells you something, you don't go around blabbing it around. You're discreet. Notice that's double E-T, discreet. The other kind of discrete is individually separate and distinct. So when you break things into discrete groups, it's E-T-E. That's kind of easy to remember because you might say, well, they're separating the two E's with the T there, so it's discrete. So here's our changes. We fixed the run-on. You can use a semicolon or a period here. We got rid of the apostrophe, and we changed this to patients, the correct spelling for the plural noun. Now, in addition to our two words for today, discrete, discrete, I also want to go back and take a look at words we had at the very beginning and review those. So hopefully you have note cards on these, but would you remember a word, an adjective that means relating to conscious individual activity? That relates to cognitive. The noun form of that is cognition, and of course that's thinking, and that's conscious thinking, isn't it? So that's system 2 thinking. That's the writer and the elephant. That's the kind of thinking we're doing now as we look at this consciously and try to figure out what's going wrong. The other kind of thinking is intuitive thinking, which is based on feelings or what you feel to be true, and it's typically without conscious thought. It's more instinctive. And that, of course, is the system 1 thinking we talked about, and that would be the elephant. That is the older part of our brain. Certainly the more influential part of our brain, but not necessarily the part that we want to just let go all the time. We want to control that with the writer. And remember, the root there is from the Greek for knowledge, at least with cognition there, and we see that in a lot of different words relating to knowledge. So reviewing those 4 words, we should have those pretty well down. Now, one more thing I want to do here is I want to start talking about some things related to syntax. I want to talk about something very, very basic in English syntax, and that is what we call kernel sentences. I'm not sure if you've talked about these before, but basically every sentence can be broken down to its most basic elements. And typically, when we talk about sentences, we talk about subjects and verbs. Sometimes this is called subjects and predicates. Predicate just being another word for a verb. And again, typically those are nouns. The subject's a noun, the predicate is a verb. So you have a sentence like this. Imagine we want to get rid of everything. We want to boil it down just to the most essential elements. That's the kernel of the sentence. So you look at this sentence. After lunch, Bill, big fan of karaoke, sang loudly in the hallway, causing everyone to cover their ears and groan. So we need a subject. Clearly the subject here is Bill. So let's highlight Bill as the subject. We could get rid of after lunch. That tells us when. And what else would we need here? We'd need a verb, wouldn't we? After lunch, Bill sang. Now ask yourself, if we had just that, Bill sang, would that be a sentence? Yes, it would. A subject and a verb. And that's the most basic kind of sentence you have. We'll call that a kernel one, which is just a subject and a verb. So we have Bill sang, dogs barked, I laughed. Now there's one other kind of kernel. We're going to call it a kernel two, and that's where you have an object, something that goes with the verb. So in this case, we don't need anything to go with it. There's not an object. There's just some description about how he sang and where he sang and all that. But sometimes you have to take an object. So if I say Mary threw the ball, Mary's the subject, the verb is threw, the ball is the object. I ate an apple. Subject is I, ate is the verb, an apple is the object. The school is the subject, taught is the verb, German is the object. And of course, you probably recognize this as very basic English word order for very common sentences. So most of the sentences you're going to see are going to be either, probably not, about 99% are going to be either subject verb kernels or subject verb object kernels. There's one more, because we have this thing in English, which is another type of verb. It's called the linking verb. It's not an action verb. It's more of a equal sign kind of verb. We call these linking verbs. So we have this verb to be, the most common verb we have in English. It's also very irregular. Is, are, was, were. We use it so often, we're not even aware of it consciously, but we should be, because we're looking at sentences. We use it all the times to say things like Jody is a junior. Jody equal sign a junior. So notice we have the subject is Jody. The linking verb links this with the complement, and we call this the complement, the junior. Here's another example. The class was loud. Notice class equals loud. In this case, we have a description word, an adjective, but it's still a complement. Famous line like love is blind. Love equals blind. Love is the subject. Linking verb is. Blind is the complement. So this is just a basic overview of the basic core elements of sentences. Again, most of the sentences in English, not all, but about 99% fall into these three categories. And so we want to be aware of what these three categories are. And this also helps you when you're reading. If you have a long sentence like the one we had here, and you want to understand that sentence, you can break it down into the basic subject, the basic verb, and that way you're going to have the kernel, and you're going to be able to understand that verb or that sentence better. So basic introduction, see if you understand subject, verb, object, kernel sentences 1, 2, and 3. We'll talk about those and review these next time we meet. Until then, I'll see you.